I am the director of global missions still. I spend all my time traveling around the world, and Dr. Mark asked me to come back and do they call them the medical lecture. I don't like the term medical. This is health lecture. What's your favorite verse in the Bible that includes the word medicine? Proverbs 17:22. What does it say? A merry heart does good like a medicine. That's the type of medicine we need. And that's what Dr. Mark's going to be talking about. Okay, let's have a word of prayer as we begin, then we'll get into the subject. Father in heaven, we're so thankful for your great love and mercies to us. We invite your presence to be with us. May we learn these simple basics that we can present our bodies, as Paul indicted us to do, as living sacrifices, holy, acceptable to you, which is our reasonable service. We ask in Christ's name. Amen. I've titled the class Back to Basics, because you got to learn some of the basics. What's the most important part of a building? Foundation, that's exactly right. It's the foundation. There's one building in the world that's famous for its foundation. What might that one be? Matter of fact, the foundation is what made it famous. It's called Pisa. The Leaning Tower of Pisa. They started building the building in 1173. They completed it in 1350. When did it start to lean? Now this is a great illustration to use when you're preaching sermons. When did that building start to lean? 1178. 5 years into the building project. When did they finally get the building completely stable so they know it's not going to fall over? In the 20th century, when they finally got that thing done. What was wrong with the building? The foundation was built on sand and clay. And there was a weak spot, and it started to sink 5 years into it. And this is an illustration for raising children. A child's character is pretty much set at 5 years. It's so important, those first 5 years. The Bible talks about two different men. One, he built his house upon the rock. When the storm came, it says it did not fall. What did the other one build his house on? Built it on sand. And when the rains came, and you'd sit there, when you think about the illustration, you think, who in their right mind would build a building on sand? Americans do. There they are, two buildings that were built on sand on the beachfront. We build foundations, not only for children, but for ourselves, and the things that we put into our bodies, the things that we do with our bodies. I'd say this child's getting a pretty good foundation, and this child, which is your normal child, especially in the West today, is laying a terrible foundation. If you can keep a child from tasting sugar for the first 11 years, they'll never have a cavity. If they're eating sugar as a child, even their baby teeth will be carried, and they will be laying a foundation for their secondary teeth. How many diseases are recognized by medical science? Anyone have any foggy idea? About 100,000 identified diseases that are known by medical science. How many doctors do you think know all about those diseases? None, not a one. Now, how many types of perfect health are there? It's only one type of perfect health. And that's what we should be studying. Rather than studying 100,000 diseases, perhaps we should be studying how to be healthy. And that's our problem. The problem we have today, we have a thing we call a healthcare system. But it's really not a healthcare system. It's a patient care system. It is managing. What does medicine do for a sickness? What's the basic purpose of a medicine? Symptoms. It's all about symptoms. If we can keep the symptoms under, we think everything's just fine, which is total foolishness. When a person has a sickness, they're looking for I like to call the magic bullet. What can I do for this different thing? Now here we don't follow the medications, we go the different route. And the problem is most people will take natural medicine with the same mindset that they took allopathic medicine. Basically, I've got a cough. What herb can I take to take care of my cough? What one thing can I do? It's never about one thing. It's about everything. I call this having a Babylonian mind. And what does it say in Revelation chapter 18 about Babylon? It says, Babylon has fallen. What should we do? Come out of her. And most of us have been raised in a Babylonian system. Our Babylonian medicine, Babylonian education, Babylonian philosophy, Babylonian sports, it all comes from basically Babylon, that Ford-type beast that came up out of the sea in Revelation 13, verse 1. We had a patient come here some years ago, and she was taking 32 medications a day. Now, just this past summer, I was in Japan. We had a patient come take 34 medications a day. She was with us for 5 days. She went home, got down to, I think, 2 medications. And then within a period of time, she had no medications, no pain, sleeping well, gave her 1 treatment. It was amazing. But anyway, she was taking 32 medications. Now, I have a problem with 32 medications. It's pretty excessive. And so what I did is I went to our library and I made a chart and I put down one of her symptoms. Now, what do you think the doctors did for her high blood pressure? Huh? Gave her medication. Well, there is a book called A Physician's Desk Reference. There's also a nurse's vision. Anyone know about the PDR? PDR will tell you all the side effects. And so I went down through the side effects until I found one of her other presenting problems, because she made a list of all of her problems when she got there. Well, one was she was tired all the time. So what did allopathic medicine do for the tiredness? Gave her medication. Well, I looked up the side effects of that particular one, and I found out that it made her agitated. So what did allopathic medications do for that? I said medication. Yeah, medication. So I looked at the major side effect of that, and that made her nauseous. You see what was happening? What was happening to this poor woman? She was taking medications for side effects of medications. And that's what most people are doing. After we got done with this, in one day, she went from 32 medications down to 4 medications. You can't just stop all medications. Some you can, just get rid of those nasty things. She got down to 4 medications. What's the number 3 or 4 cause of death in America today?
Accidents.
Accidents? Okay, there's a lot of that.
Say 3 or 4. Number 3 or 4.
Well, yeah, somewhere, I'm going to show you what it is really, but between 3rd and 6th leading, what's the number 1 cause of death in America? Heart disease. Number 2? Cancer. Somewhere between 3 and 6, it is a thing called iatrogenic nosocomial. How many have heard of those terms? Never heard of those terms. Very, very interesting. Basically, iatrogenic is basically hospital mistakes, botched surgeries, medication side effects. And nosocomial is hospital-borne diseases. What's the main hospital-borne disease? What kind of staph? MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. And we find it in hospitals, and it's resistant to methicillin, which is one of the strongest antibiotics. Okay, so this is just looking at 1 year. 12,000 unnecessary surgeries that ended in death, 7,000 medication errors in the hospital, 20,000 other errors in hospitals, 80,000 infections in hospitals, 106,000 non-error negative effects of drugs. These total 225,000 deaths per year from iatrogenic causes. This is reported in the Journal of the American Medical Association. This is the Fox telling us what they were doing in their own hen house, which makes basically it the number 3 cause of death in America. And this was a study done in 2000, looking at 1999, and I don't think it's gotten any better right now. How long is the lifespan of a drug in the PDR? About 5 years. They find out, whoops, it's not doing what we wanted it to do. It's killing people. It's giving them all kinds of problems. Have you ever, when you took a drug, and I know you've all taken drugs, I've taken them, have you ever read the adverse side effects? Have you ever wondered, do I want my problem or these adverse side effects? That's sometimes, but you know, this is not just a problem in the West. I was working in India. This is me working in India. You've heard of patient confidentiality? No such thing in India. Here I am, my translator and the patient and all the other patients all listening to everything going on. And so the patient would come and they'd tell me their problem. Then I would say, okay, why don't you try doing this, and this. I come up with some natural things they could do of things, I've been in the area, what they could do to make themselves feel better. How many of you have been to India? Okay. How many of you ever talked to an Indian? Okay. How do they say yes? They do a Mr. Bobblehead and put out their hand. And so they would do the Mr. Bobblehead, put out their hand and say, tablets. I said, I didn't mention tablets. I said, just do these simple things. Well, what I had to do is I had to go into an English chemist, they call pharmacies English chemist shops, and I get large boxes of simple vitamins, vitamin C, B complex, whatever. I'd cut them in strips, and then when they would come to me with their problems, I'd tell them the things that they could do. And then I'd paste them together, a long strip. It looks more impressive when you pull up a long strip of these tablets. And I say, take one of these every day with 8 glasses of water. Yeah. And so now you're going to flush their systems out. You're going to hydrate the people very nicely. And it's amazing. They will do the 5 things, and they'll give all the credit to what? The pill. The vitamin C pill that they just took. What is a disease? What is a definite? This is from Councils on Health. It's the best definition that there is. As a matter of fact, I was listening to a sermon by Randy Skeet. He says he was on an elevator going to visit a patient in a hospital, and he was in there with a friend of his, and there's all these doctors all around. So Randy says, I'm going to try something. He says to his friend, he says, I know what disease is. Of course, all the doctors, perking up. He says, disease is an effort of nature to free itself from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. Beautiful. That's the best definition. And all the doctors sat there and looked at each other. Yeah, that's right. The guy's right. So now, if this is what disease is, what do we do? First step. First thing, in case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. Why am I sick? I used to smoke. I had a sore throat every morning. Should I take a throat lozenge? That will take care of the symptom, won't it? How do you get rid of the sore throat? Quit smoking. Just quit smoking. Second step, all right? Unhealthful conditions should be changed. Wrong habits corrected. If you're drinking the wrong things, start drinking the right things. If you're eating the wrong things, start eating the right things. If you're doing the wrong things, start doing the right things. That's just simple. See, if you learn these basics right here, you don't need to know, you don't have to go to medical school, just go back to the basics. And the third thing is, then nature is to be assisted in her effort to expel impurities and reestablish right conditions in the system. Hot foot bath, some of you will be taking a sauna while you're here, hydrotherapy, drinking more water, whatever. These will help expel impurities from the body. So we'll be talking a little bit about that when we get to cancer. When the children of Israel left Egypt, God gave them a promise. What does every promise come with? A condition. Exactly, it comes with a condition. And so the promise in Exodus 15:26, he says, if you will listen to me, if you will do what I say, keep my commandments and my statutes. You know, the Bible has commandments, statutes, and judgments. Study these. I was preparing a sermon in Japan a few years ago, and as I was preparing it, this idea about what are the statutes and the judgments. And I started studying through the Bible, and the next day I gave the sermon talking about what these things are. And I was told by the person who brings me over there, she said, preach this sermon at every church you go to. Anyway, those are the conditions. If you do these things, keep his statutes, I will put what? None of these diseases upon you which I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that heals you. Now, this last part supposes that you've already got the disease. So what do? Go back to the commandments, statutes, and judgments, and he can heal your disease. You cannot get a disease healed if you're in insubordination, if you're not doing what God says you to do. So what were the diseases of the Egyptians? They've studied the mummies, about 1,500 mummies. They really did a good job of mummifying the people. And here's what some of the main diseases of the Egyptians were. They were dying of diabetes. As a matter of fact, they found what they assumed was the mummy of Moses' stepmother. She was grossly obese, high blood pressure, diabetes, and all kinds of dental caries. So diabetes, heart disease, cancer, sexually transmitted diseases. Does it sound somewhat vaguely familiar? Sounds like today, doesn't it? And so when he says, if you do these things, you won't get the diseases of the Egyptians, who's he talking to? He's talking to us. If we do what he says, we should not be worried about disease. Almost anyone in America, my age, I'm 70 years old, what does almost every single one of them take every single day? An aspirin, exactly right. Why are they taking an aspirin? All right, it's for the heart, because they assume everyone that gets up to 70 years old is only barely hanging on to life, and they better take an aspirin to keep their blood thin. How does it keep the blood thin? It poisons the ability to clot. So therefore, if you're taking the aspirin today and you cut yourself shaving, you're going to have a hard time stopping the bleeding. It's crazy what they do. And so basically, we expect, as we get older, let me say it another way. Old age is not a disease. Menopause is not a disease. We treat these things like a disease. I got a lecture on cognition and the brain. We expect everyone that gets old to have memory problems. We get into bad habits. We quit learning. We quit developing our minds. We quit exercising our bodies and our minds. In Exodus 3:2, God appears to Moses at the burning bush. And while he's at the burning bush, what's he asking Moses to do? Go down to Egypt and get my people out of there. Does he want to go? Does not want to go. He's making all kinds of excuses. And God asked him a question in Exodus 4, verse 2. He says, what's in your hand? What was in Moses' hand at the time? A shepherd's rod. So he's got a rod in his hand. What was he able to do with this rod? This is a biblical principle, all right? He threw it down in front of Pharaoh and became a snake. He raised it up over the Red Sea, it parted. When he held it up, his army could not lose a battle. When he struck a rock, water would come out. This is a basic principle of health. What do you think that is? What's in your hand? What do you have right here to take care of your problems? If you go back to Romans 12, verse 2, I already mentioned the first part. The second part is, don't be conformed to the world, be transformed in your mind that you might prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. God says, look, you can get healthy and it's your reasonable service. You don't have to go to, Timbuktu to find some strange drug. Everything you need is right here. Out here in the forest, we got poison ivy. Near the poison ivy grows either English ivy or jewelweed, both of which are an antidote for poison ivy. God has a solution. I believe that there is a cure for every known disease. Let me ask you a question. Where do all diseases come from? All right, bad lifestyle choices. All right, let's go back even further than that. I'll just tell you the answer. All diseases come from the mind of Satan. Now, does God know the mind of Satan? Does God know the disease that Satan's thinking about before Satan even thinks about it? He does. And God already had an antidote before Satan even thought about the disease. In nature, there's a cure for every known disease. In the West Coast, they got a tree called the Pacific yew, Y-E-W. You realize that they found that tree, they have synthesized a product in that tree, and they make okay, I'm forgetting the word now. They're making a thing that keeps you, that they use for cancer. What's it called? Well, yeah, that's what it is. It's, wow, I'm having a real brain burp right now. What do people do when they get cancer? They get chemotherapy. It's a chemotherapeutic agent. But they've separated it from its constituent coating. The most popular drug. What's the most popular drug in the world today? And it's been that way since 1880. Most common drug. All of you have it in your house. Some of you probably have it in your purse. No? Well, just aspirin. Simple aspirin. Where did aspirin come from? It comes from two plants. Matter of fact, the first part, asp, comes from the aspen, a form of the aspen called white willow bark. The last part, spirin, comes from spirea or the meadowsweet. They saw that both of these are analgesics for pain. Both of these are antifibrils, bring down temperatures. They synthesized them, took them away from their natural coatings, put them together, and now it's a drug. And it's a poisonous drug. We won't get into that. All right, how about Naaman when he got leprosy? What did God have him do? Oh, I'm sorry, I got it in Romanian. Anyway, you know what the story is. I was explaining before. I don't lecture in America. I lecture in other countries. And so I've changed my Romanian slides in English today, my Japanese slides in English today to give you the programs. Anyway, but he goes down there to Elisha, and what treatment did Elisha recommend? All right, 7 hydrotherapy treatments in the Jordan River, okay? That's what it was. Did he want to do that? He thought it was foolishness. Quite frankly, most people think simple remedies are foolishness. They'd rather depend upon the Babylonian doctor than God's simple ways. But what happened when he took his 7th hydrotherapy treatment? Completely well. All right, how about when Hezekiah was sick unto death? He had a boil. What did the Lord tell Isaiah to do for the boil? Fig poultice. We've done the same thing here. We got lots of fig trees here. When the blind people would come to Christ, often he would anoint their eyes with clay that was made clay with spittle. There's enzymes in the saliva. There are properties in the clay that both brought the healing to the men. I was working in the country of Moldova. This is a place called Surata Noa. There's a school on this side of the lake. This is the wintertime. This is a frozen over lake. And they have a clinic in this town where the doctors come from probably Chisinau once a week, and they see the patients. And when they had a patient there who was paralyzed, and they says, we can't help you. Well, there were some students and a staff member at the school, Surata Noa, who went to this man every day. And they would do a hydrotherapy and massage. And one day, his feet started moving. And then his legs started moving. And now he's a student in the university in Chisinau, completely normal. And so now when patients go to the clinic and the doctors say, we don't know what to do with you, you know what they say? Go to the people of the forest. This is it. This is the school building. It's no longer there. The school's not there anymore. But anyway, great bunch of young people. He says, go to the people of the forest. Now, why do I have that thing there? Anyway, people of the forest. And here's the people of the forest. Not one doctor, not one nurse among them. Wonderful, wonderful people. They use God's simple remedies. I was in the country of Namibia, in the Caprivi Strip some years ago, and this young boy, he was, every time he'd come around, he'd be acting like a clown. He just liked to show off for us. And then one day, he was very, very sick. And I had taken 2 students with me to Africa, and they went to visit him on a Friday evening. They came back and said, sir, you got to see him. There's something wrong. And I went there the next day. It smelled like death. So we carried him back. These are my 2 students. Carried him back to this compound where we're working, run by Romanians. As a matter of fact, this is a Romanian doctor. This is a Romanian pastor. The doctor's examining the young boy and he says, he's dying. There's nothing we can do. I said, I didn't bring any medications with me. Fever very high. So first thing we did, we gave him a wet sheet pack. I had my students, I give him a wet sheet pack. Brings the temperature down. Wasn't enough, and so then I took him outside and put him in a Namibian wash machine. Put him in a tub with hot water, put a towel around him. I kept putting the hot water on the towel. I was raising his temperature. Why would I want to raise the temperature of a child who already has an elevated temperature? What gives you a temperature? What part of your body makes temperature? All right, it's part of you. It's perfect. It's your hypothalamus, which when it sees that there's a disease going on, will tell the hypothalamus will produce a prostaglandin E, which turns up the thermoregulatory set point, turns up the temperature. All right, so it determines how high. Let's say it turns up to 102. What happens if I turn it up to 103 by physical environment? What's the body going to do? It's going to dial it down because it says, oh, we overshot the mark. And so I did that, and then I poured cold water all over his body, which he didn't like at all. The doctor dried him off. We took him inside, and pretty soon he was hungry. Gave him some sustenance, and a half hour later he was up playing. Yeah, he was dying an hour before. Now he's up playing perfectly well. See, that hot and cold treatment very much gives a boost to that immune system you mentioned. It's amazing. My students in Zambia, they get done with a class, they go out and try to find sick people. And one day they came to me and said, sir, you got to see this little girl. She's got a bad ear infection. I really think this was MRSA. Ear completely full of pus. Look at her eyes. What do the eyes tell you? She's crying all the time. Pain all the time. She's got a hole going into her head behind her ear, blisters all around. And my student says, what should we do? Now, what did God ask Moses? What's in your hand? And so basically, what do we have right here at Riverside Farms in Zambia that's going to help this child to get well? We have some garlic growing. What's garlic good for? Besides keeping people away from you. It's a great antibiotic. We have some aloe vera, which is antiseptic and is also astringent. I have some golden seal with me, which is a powerful remedy. We had charcoal, which takes up infection and inflammation. And some oil. We took the things that we had right there. We have some echinacea growing. What's another name for echinacea? Purple coneflower. I had a bunch of it growing in my house, in my yard right here at UT Pines. So we made some eardrops. And I says, my students, go there, and I would take 50 bulb syringes with me. Bulb syringes are good for irrigation. Forget telling the people to run their head under a faucet in their house. They've got to go down to the river to get the water. So they basically irrigated the ear. Now there's another way you can irrigate the ear or a wound. The Lord showed me this in China, in India, and I don't have one here. But I had a man who had a really bad infected foot, and he had this black stuff all over it. And I had to clean it. There was no running water anywhere, but I had a 2-liter bottle, plastic bottle of water. And I had a percussion hammer, which you could unscrew the back, and there was a nail or a needle. I poked a hole in the plastic lid, squeezed the bottle, and I had a jet of water, cleaned it off. So I says, clean her ear out, have the parents put these drops in and around the ear at night. In daytime, put a charcoal poultice over her ear. Her parents, now this sounds like a Bible story, have spent all their living on this child, trying to find a healing. And she was no better, but rather, you know the biblical story, the woman with the issue of blood 12 years, rather became worse. 1 week later, this is what it was. Do you see the difference? Just looking at her eyes tell the difference. She's not crying anymore. There's no infection left. It looks nasty because that's a scab, but it completely got her well. They cook with charcoal in India and Africa. And if you can't find that, I'd send them out to termite mounds because this is clay. I said, just get that, powder it, mix it with water, and you got it. In What was happening 100 years ago right now? Don't look at the picture. It has nothing to do with the question. What was happening 100 years ago right now? Exactly. Matter of fact, America was entering World War I in 1917, 1918. When the war ended, the armistice on November the 11th, 1918, within the end of the month, there was another war going on in the world that took far more lives. 1918, 1919 took upwards of 20 to 100 million lives in the world. Does anyone know what that was? 1 year. The great Spanish flu pandemic. Now, they don't really know that it was Spanish flu. They've only got a fragment of the DNA, which they just surmised. It doesn't matter what it was. People were dying everywhere. In hospitals, up to 35% of the people dying in hospitals, except for one place they weren't dying. Where do you think that was? Right there. Where's that? Battle Creek Sanitarium. Who was their doctor? John Harvey Kellogg. And I've got the article what he did for his patients who came there with this influenza. First, he put them on a high fiber diet. Where do we get fiber? Plants. You're not going to find it in animals. There's no fiber in animals unless you go through the stomach contents. What do? We refine our bread. We got white bread, white rice, white pasta, white everything else. What do we do with the fiber? Where do we get rid of it to? We feed it to the pigs and the cows. Matter of fact, they eat better than we do sometimes. They get all the fiber. All right, so he gave them high fiber diet, and then he gave them 3 to 4 liters of liquids a day. 3 to 4 liquids. And then also, he would have this patients receive 2 enemas a day until the water ran clear. And if they're having that achiness around their body, he would give them some type of a hydrotherapy treatment to make them feel better, whether they're adult or a child. You think that would work for any influenza? It's influenza. Influenza is influenza. All right, let me I'm not going to ask how many of you get your flu shot every year because I suspect most of you do. What influenza is that flu shot for?
H1N1.
All right, H1N1. Which one is H1N1? That's swine flu. All right, but there's another very common flu. That's the H1N5, which is what? That's bird flu or avian flu. All right, so looking at those two combinations, how many possibilities of combinations do you have here? 10. If you made a chart, H1, all right, you've got, so you could assume there would be, let's see, I think it was H2, N5. So it ends up with 10. So now you got 10 different things, but the influenza shot's good for just one. How many other types of influenza are there? They found, I think in the year, I forget what year it was, down in Peru, they found a fruit bat which had hemagglutinin 11, neuraminidase 18. Now, how many combinations do you have? 198. And yet the influenza vaccine is for one strain. And when you get that one strain, they're putting things in you that you do not want in your body. You're going to get some mercury, you're going to get some aluminum, you're going to get some fetal material, you're going to get some albumin, you're going to get all kinds of stuff you do not want in your body. What do we go back to what John Harvey Kellogg did in 1918, 1919? All right, now, we're going to get to the basic principle of health. I love this story. Lord Palmerston, Premier of England, was petitioned by the Scotch clergy. They're having a cholera epidemic up there. And they wrote down and says, please, declare a day of prayer and fasting. His reply is brilliant. Does anyone know what his reply was? It's in the book Sanctified Life by Ellen G. White. Here it was. Cleanse and disinfect your streets and houses. Promote cleanliness and health among the poor. See that they are plentifully supplied with good food and raiment. Employ right sanitation measures generally. Why would they want to do all these things? What causes cholera? Unclean environment. That's right. It comes in there. Now, so that's what he recommended. Now, what he finished with is absolutely brilliant. He says, and you will have no occasion to fast and pray. Why? You removed the cause. But that's not the last thing he said. He says, nor will God hear your prayers while these, his preventives, remain unheeded. How many of you have ever conducted, pastors, even wives, been involved in a anointing service according to James, the 5th chapter? Did you examine the patient first to make sure they're doing nothing that would block God's healing power? Even the people in anointing, we have to all pray before we can do those things. Sanctified Life, page 30, paragraph 1. It is brilliant. Okay, so basically, this is foundation principle of health. But I usually give another illustration to make it clearer. All right, talking about a man who had a very sore foot. So he goes to the doctor, an allopathic physician. He says, I got a really painful foot. So he says, no problem, we just give you a shot of painkiller. Does not like this idea, so he goes to another doctor, and the doctor says, not a problem with your pain, just take some of these analgesics. Doesn't like that idea, he goes to a third doctor. The doctor says, not a problem, just lean on this cane, you won't put so much pressure on that sore foot. Doesn't like that idea. He goes to a fourth doctor. Now this fourth doctor, he's got the best idea. He says, not a problem, just sit your foot up here and we'll just cut the thing off. And everyone always laughs at this, but this is what we do, does it not? What happens when a person has appendix problems? Cut it thing out. Tonsils problem. Mine were gone since I was 3 years old. A spleen, gallbladder, even the teeth. Cut the things out. That's what we do. That's not God's way. So he goes to the fifth. He did not like number 4 at all. He goes to number 5 doctor. The number 5 doctor says, why don't we take off the shoe? And when he takes off the shoe, he notices a large stone in the shoe. Okay, now how many of you are doctors? None. What should he do? Except for Dr. Mark back there. What should he do? Yes, doctor. Take the rock out of the shoe. What's the principle? Foundation, basic principle of health. What is it? Reason from cause to effect. If a person, and that's what Dr. Mark's going to be talking about in evening times. But you're going to find the causes much different than you can imagine in most cases. Oh, so now we got the foundation. Do not forget the foundation. I'm not going to give you a test at the end of the course, but we've always got a reason. Let me give you an example. People usually, the Bible says, Christ, without a parable, spake he not a thing. People remember the stories. I was in Ukraine. You lose 7 hours sleep getting there. Your time's upside down. I'm invited to a lady's house one Sabbath, lovely lunch. After the lunch was over, she brought a large tray of cookies out. I love cookies. Hint, hint, hint. I love cookies. But these were not Health Reform Uchi Pines cookies. These were bought in the kiosk down in the street, white flour, white sugar, and fat cookies. And I thought, she spent all this money to give me those cookies, so I would be polite and I'll eat one. So, they were so good, I decided to be doubly polite. I ate my second one. It was so good, I thought, I'll be triply polite. I ate, I don't know how many cookies that day, but I was sick for a week. Symptomatic for a week. Because, and I knew why. I knew the reason, and the effect was the disease I got, the sickness I got. Okay, now, but on top of the foundation, there are 3 golden pillars. If you remember nothing else, just remember these first few slides. I'm not going to get anywhere near done with this program on 84 of 153 slides. But the first pillar, this is a law. It says the life is in the blood. We find that in the book of Leviticus. Where does our blood come from? I know it comes from the marrow, but where else? In the spleen. Where else is it? What does it really come from? It comes from the food that you eat, what you put into your body. Did you have a nice breakfast this morning? I didn't eat this morning. But anyway, which is fine with me. But what we put into our body is going to build the blood that's coursing through our bodies, making our cells, making our thoughts, making our emotions, everything else. All right, then we go to the second golden pillar. You can have the best blood in the world, but if it's not circulating, it's not going to do you any good. How many diseases are circulatory problems? Strokes, heart attacks, and diabetes, and many other diseases. So basically, this is Counsels in Health 92, paragraph 3. Basically, what we do with our bodies. Now, I used to stop at those, but now I go to the third one, and frankly, this is what Dr. Mark talks about, because the third law of health is your attitude about life. Your attitude. Does that lady look happy? That's my mother, surrounded by some of her great-grandchildren on her 90th birthday. She was an amazing lady. She's still alive, 90 years old, but 94 now. But she always was happy. She always used to say, Don, you're an Adventist. Don't be a sad Adventist. Be a glad Adventist. Yeah, I never really took her advice. Reason from cause to effect. Teach your children to reason from cause to effect. Now, I'm not going to read all these things. Child Guidance 362, paragraph 1. So teach your children to observe. Whatever they do, there's going to be an effect. All right? Another thing, folks. I am a medical missionary. I want you to be medical missionaries. Matter of fact, Sister White says we all should be medical missionaries. You don't have to take pictures of every slide. Give me a flash drive. I'll give you my programs. I want you to go home and do this in your churches. I'm going to be in Europe all winter, spring, so I'm not going to be able to come to your church, but I've come anytime you ask me. Matter of fact, I had a sermon this past Sabbath in Louisville, Kentucky. Next Sabbath is going to be in Grove, Kentucky. I live in Kentucky now. In dealing with the patients in the sanitariums, we must reason from cause to effect. Why do you have this problem? So rather than treating the symptom, as you mentioned, we got to treat the basic primary cause. Goes on. Our workers should use their knowledge of laws of life and health. They should study from cause to effect. So as you study, as pastors' wives, Bible workers, whatever, we need to study. Okay, now, we have what we call the laws of health. How many are there? 8. What do we call them? We call it New Start. Now, if I were giving a test on Friday, I would say, you will not give me that answer anymore. I am not for New Start. Why? It stopped too soon. I use an acronym called Stewardship. So let me go down the Stewardship laws of health. Sunshine. All right, that's good. Trust, wonderful law of health. We've got the exercise thing. We've got the water thing. We got the air thing. But now what Dr. Mark talks about, what I talk about an awful lot myself right now, is another A called attitude or cheerfulness. Here's what Ellen White says. Physicians always tell a patient, go to Arizona, go on a voyage, whatever else. When in 9 cases out of 10, if they would do simple things. 1, eat temperately and engage in healthful exercise with a cheerful spirit. Number 9, a cheerful spirit. Does your attitude make a difference? Before you get done with this week, you're going to know it's a major difference. You just read Dr. Hamer from Germany. Unbelievable. All right? Then we got rest, but there's another R. Regularity. Regularity in everything that you do. Where we get that one from? The importance of regularity, 10th law of health, in the time for eating and sleeping should not be overlooked. We should eat at the same time every day. We should go to bed at the same time every night and get up at the same time every morning. And then there's diet. Oops, but then there's another D. What do you think the other D is? Dress. Is dress important? Let's see what Sister White says. Parents who dress clothing their children with the extremities naked or nearly so are sacrificing the health and lives of their children to fashion. Wearing constrictive clothing is bad for our circulation. Then we got self-control. Then we got herbs. Is that an important one? Okay. These are, all right, look at this. Water, air, sunlight, these are God's healing agents, the use of certain herbs. So she's put them in a category in the same paragraph with these other laws of health. I love this statement right here. 7th manuscript releases 354. The leaves of the tree of life are for the healing of the believing, repenting children of God who avail themselves of the blessing to be found in tree, shrub, and flower, even marred as nature is by the curse. You want the leaves from the tree of life? Is in herbs. Let me give you an example. I was working in our shop. We got a shop here some years ago. We've got a unisaw, which is a really powerful table saw. And I was basically cutting a piece of wood really nicely, but I didn't have one of these things. I was doing like this knucklehead. I was using my hand to keep the wood against the rib fence. Well, it was a narrow piece of wood. When I got the end of the wood cut, it twisted and my fingers went into the saw blade. And this isn't my fingers. This finger looked just like this finger. I cut the tips of 2 fingers off and right down to the bone. And I went down to the Lifestyle Center, which is Old Anawardi where I'm staying, and they sent someone up to get the fingers so they could sew them back on. They couldn't find them. Well, the nurse, Dana Lott, as a matter of fact, I'm living on property near her and her husband, she gave me some comfrey powder leaf. And every night I'd mix a little of the powder with some water, put it on my stubs, and put tips of rubber gloves over my fingers. 3 weeks after the accident, I was playing the guitar again. It was my left hand, which is what you press the strings with, and I have no scars. Right down to the bones. 3 weeks is completely grown back. 4.5 years ago, to be 5 years in May, I was going from this Lifestyle Center back to my office, and I brought some herbs up for one of the patients, and I was going down the hill, and I met a vehicle, and to try to avoid that, I had a bicycle accident. Pretty bad one. I broke a few bones. I broke my right clavicle. I broke my first rib, my second rib, my third rib, fifth rib, seventh rib, ninth rib, and multiple fractures of my pelvis. And I spent a week in the hospital. Medicare spent $25,000, well, $24,500. I spent $500 for that experience. Then I came back here, and you met Duthier, some of you last night, and another LC called Judner. I was in one of the rooms here, and they put comfrey poultices on me every night. My ribs were healed in 1 month. 3 months after the accident, I climbed to the top of Fujisan in Japan, Mount Fuji. This is a picture from the top down on Tokyo. Comfrey is one of the leaves of the tree of the healing of the nations. You don't have comfrey, everyone's got plantain. It does the same thing. Internally, it'll heal. It does wonderful things for your stomach. We had a patient here some years ago who had a large ulcer on her leg. You notice that she's rather overweight. She is diabetic. What is the school book solution for her problem? Amputation. Well, we didn't really want to do that. Our knives were all dull. So we started working on various things. This is one of our doctors. He's from Argentina, Dr. Facundo Beach. He's putting golden seal on there. Just didn't do the job. But they finally found the solution. Cabbage and onions. What? Yeah. Made a poultice out of pulverized cabbage and onions, put it on the leg, and this is what happened. Wow, that's good. Praise the Lord. The leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations, and we still get them. All right, another law of, yes?
That plantain that you saw, is that the same banana-like?
No, that's another. This is plantango. This is the leaf that you see laying on the ground. Okay. All right. Now, the plantain you're talking about, if you slice it and dry it, it's extremely good for any internal problems. Very, very good. All right, another H is hygiene or cleanliness. Is that important? Well, here she says pure air, water, cleanliness. So she puts it in with some of the other laws of health. That's number 13, a proper diet, purity of life. Okay. Another one is innocence or a clear conscience. God's physicians, pure air, pure water, proper exercise, a clear she says God physicians, so apparently a clear conscience is important. Another little story. A woman I was lecturing in Japan near Oita, and a woman was there, and at the end of the lecture, she came to me, she says, I've got some problems. I've got depression. I've got pain all over my body. I can't sleep at night. She just, this long list of problems. Then she just sat there with her sad look on her face, and what's the foundation principle of health? Already told you.
Cause to effect.
Reason from cause to effect. So I asked her a question. I says, how long have you had these symptoms? Because I knew they were symptomatic. She said without hesitation, 42 years. What's the second question? Exactly! What happened 42 years ago? So I'm trying to find the cause. She said she got very sick one day, went to the hospital. She was told she had appendicitis, and she was told that she was pregnant. And she told the doctors, oh, my husband doesn't want me having children yet. And so they talked her into having an abortion. She came out of surgery, appendix gone, and they told her it was a little girl. I just found her problem. You understand? What was her main problem? Guilt. That's the one. What do you do with guilt? 1 John 1:9. And what you do, you don't just say, now read that verse, good. Now believe it. Let's go on to the next verse. We unpack the verse. What did it cost Christ to be able to forgive our sins? His life. So we went through the whole verse. We really unpacked it. How about this weight that she'd been carrying for a long time? What does Jesus say? Come unto me, all you labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. All three verses, we unpack the verse. She had a lack of peace. What did Jesus say? Peace I leave with you. We went through many, many verses, but we got to the last problem, the little girl. You think she missed that little girl? What promise do you give her for that one? 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. And I says, if you are faithful, when you're rising in the clouds, you're going to be handed that little girl to raise in heaven. She was completely well, asymptomatic in 2 days. 2 days. And every one of you, especially after you get on with Dr. Mark's lectures, will be able to do this with people. You've got to clear up what's in the mind. It's a law of health, a clear conscience. Then the last one is purity of life. We find it in this statement I've already shown you. Pure air, water, cleanliness, proper diet, purity of life. The 15th law of health. The violation of this law has caused more death than you can shake a stick at. How about AIDS? Did it not begin in impurity? Began with the first human case of it they tracked down was a British Air steward who would have 400 partners a year. Yeah, I don't know how you did that. Anyway, AIDS crosses. And then go to Africa. Have you ever been there? AIDS orphanages everywhere. Matter of fact, there's a highway that runs from Cape Town, South Africa to Nairobi, Kenya. They told me what they call that highway. They call it the AIDS Highway. Yeah, and I could tell you why, but I won't go into that. And then abortion crosses. 3 times as many crosses every day, children being aborted. So here is your new acronym, Stewardship. I know that sometimes you don't have time, but some of these, I know dress is a touchy subject, but hygiene, everyone knows about hygiene, wash your hands, all this stuff, attitude. But attitude, to me, that's one of the most important. If you don't like the 15 laws of health, we are stewards. We are stewards of this body. God gave us to take care of these things. Okay, I'm not going to be able to get any further done on this program. Any questions at this point? Yes.
What is your take on essential oils? Because those are herbs, but so many people use them for the New Age.
I know, and this is a problem. You know, the truth lies error lies very near the truth sometimes. Ellen White talks about essential, she doesn't use the term essential oils, but what smells does Sister White say are healing? Echinacea, balsam, and she says there's healing in the balsam and the pine, just to smell. Walk into a pine forest, and there's just something about the smell. Lavender, what do we use lavender for? Relaxing, yes. Now you can also use it topically because it's a good antiseptic. It's great for burns. But there are many herbs that we can use as essential oils. But here's the problem. New Age takes it over here, and next thing you've got, smelling essential oils while you're holding crystals in your right hand and a triangle in your left hand. We got to be very careful with how we deal with these things. But yes, there are healing properties in the echinacea. Do you like to smell echinacea? We do inhalation therapy here with echinacea. Just will clear out that head wonderfully.